Imagine the autumn of 275 AD, as the evening winds of the Thracian wilderness sweep through the heavy encampments of the Roman legions. Deep within the praetorium, a woman, by the flickering light of a lamp, gently smooths the wrinkles upon her husband's battle tunic. Her husband is Emperor Aurelian, hailed as the restorer of the world, and she is Ulpia Severina, the one who stood unfalteringly in his shadow. Who could have surmised that on this tranquil night, an absurd conspiracy, birthed from a secretary's forged document, was creeping near? This god of war, who miraculously reunified the splintered Roman Empire in just 5 years, was about to fall by the blades of his own most trusted guards. Tonight, by the rhythmic pulse of the hearth and through this narrative meant to be felt rather than merely memorized, let us step into the true odyssey of her life. She was the Empress of Rome, a woman who spent most of her life on horseback alongside her husband during an era of imperial disintegration. She witnessed a queen in golden chains, the rebirth of an empire from its ruins, and the cruel reality of absolute power vanishing in a heartbeat. This is a story of composure, of remaining sober at the edge of grand narratives, and of how to walk alone into the afterglow following an ultimate disillusionment. Severina's life was initially entwined with the darkest depths of Rome's crisis of the 3rd century. The empire then was like a mangled giant, with Palmyra in the east and the Goths in the west gnawing at its fragmented body. Born not of a grand patrician house but as the daughter of a military family, she understood better than most how to guard an inner order amidst upheaval. When she married Aurelian, a man of humble birth whose martial prowess earned him the nickname Sword in Hand, she knew she had chosen a path far removed from tranquility. She traversed the frigid winds of the Danube and spent nights in the snows of the Apennines. Her silhouette was a constant presence in mud-streaked marching tents. You must realize that in an age where emperors were replaced as frequently as shadows at noon, Severina's stillness became Aurelian's most steadfast anchor. She realized the game of power was essentially a war against chaos, and her role was to provide a harbor where her husband could shed his armor in the eye of the storm. As she mended tunics in the dead of night to the sound of distant sentry whistles, her profound resilience lent a silent stability to the surrounding generals. This strength, precipitated in reason, allowed her to maintain a clarity and detachment as deep as a crystalline pool. Even at the pinnacle of worldly power in 274 AD, Rome witnessed one of the most magnificent triumphs in its history. Severina, clad in the most splendid robes of Tyrian purple silk, sat atop a grand chariot, observing the crowds whose cheers bordered on delirium. Before her eyes marched Zenobia, the once mighty queen of the East, now bound in golden chains, treading slowly as a trophy of war. This was the zenith of splendor. In a mere 5 years, Aurelian had made a moribund empire stand tall once more. Yet, at that very moment, amidst the swirling blizzard of flower petals, Severina felt a strange hollowness. She looked at the golden shackles, then at her husband's face, lined with exhaustion yet imbued with a near-divine aura, and realized that all this glory was built upon a precarious equilibrium. Amidst the cacophony of the triumph, she began to contemplate the nature of disillusionment. If mending an empire required the lifeblood of an entire generation, how long could such wholeness endure? She did not drown in the privileges of an empress. Instead, she began to frequent the temple of the sun more often, seeking eternal truths among the towering Corinthian columns. She understood that the restorer of the world was, in fact, a man imprisoned by the world. This restraint toward glory allowed her, when the subsequent night of blood arrived, to accept her predestined loneliness more swiftly than any other. The absurd assassination occurred at an unremarkable way station in Sino Furium. Simply because a secretary feared the emperor's wrath and forged a proscription list, officers who were once fiercely loyal to Aurelian chose to strike first out of sheer terror. When Severina reached the praetorium, the air was thick with the lingering scent of iron. The monarch who had just reunified the world had become a cold corpse. The camp fell into a deathly silence, followed by an explosion of lamentation and fury. But Severina did not weep. She knelt silently beside her husband, and with those hands that had smoothed countless tunics, she tidied Aurelian's disheveled hair for the last time. In that moment, she seemed to witness the total eclipse of a grand dream. All the conquests, all the territories, and all the medals seemed weightless before this single wound. She rejected the general suggestions to install a puppet successor. She realized Aurelian's death was a form of cosmic conclusion to his overexhaustion by the era. She delivered one final address to the legions, her tone calm and measured, which not only quelled the unrest but filled the soldiers with an unprecedented sense of solemnity. Like a watcher who had fulfilled a long and arduous mission, she took her husband's ashes and quietly withdrew from the vortex of power that had once brought her both glory and exhaustion. In her later years, Severina did not choose to remain within the main text of grand historical chronicles. Instead, she faded into the shadows of a temple of Sol Invictus. She was formally declared Augusta by the Senate, yet it was a title devoid of secular power. Walking beneath the marble colonnades, she observed the endless flow of pilgrims. She knew the empire still rocked in the storm, Successors tried to mimic Aurelian, yet none possessed the purity required to mend a world. This clarity, having seen through the cycle of power yet content to watch the afterglow, became the bedrock of her composure. In those quiet afternoons, she would track the movement of light and shadow across the temple walls. She penned her true realizations regarding time. Power is like the light on these walls. No matter how dazzling, it is ultimately consumed by darkness. She wrote of that ultimate solitude. It was no longer a pain, but a hard, clean dignity, like marble with all impurities filtered away. She even engaged in secret correspondence with Zenobia, the woman once her husband's captive, then living out her days near Rome. These two women, who once stood at opposite ends of the world, reached a wondrous reconciliation through their letters. They spoke no more of maps, but of how to cultivate a quiet flower upon a ruin. In those long years forgotten by the annals of history, Severina finally achieved a cold, crystalline wholeness of her own around 300 AD. In a secluded villa on the outskirts of Rome, Severina closed her eyes forever. When the news of her passing spread through the eternal city, there was no grandiose funeral. Only the bells of the Temple of the Sun tolled thrice, muffled and somber in the dusk. She departed with profound quietude, as if simply completing a vigil timed to the final second. She had answered the question posed in the prologue. Was the weight of power's disillusionment heavy? In truth, the heaviest burden was not disillusionment, but the ultimate loyalty to truth that remained uncorrupted even on the brink of collapse. Do you feel it now? That sense of peace, cool and stable as a marble statue, reaching across 17 centuries. Rome's legions have long since turned to dust, the reliefs on the triumphal arches have weathered away. Only Severina's quiet composure remains in the deep midnight of history, like a faint lamp that refuses to be extinguished. This is a strength that does not need to roar, the finality of a watcher's soul. Tonight, may you drift into sleep accompanied by the afterglow in Severina's journals and the steadiness born of her absolute composure. The world has fallen silent. It is time for you to let go of the day's distractions. Good night.